So Rich is best known as a cephalopod head. I like to call him the Ceph head because that's kind of a joke because it's Latin for head and English head, so he's the head. But one of the things that Rich is really, really good at is being thought-provoking and being the skeptic, sometimes the cynic, but usually the skeptic, and getting people to think about why they do what it is they do. And so, there's a lot of things that we take for granted, including first phosphates. I'm sure everyone here in this room thinks they know what phosphates are and thinks they understand phosphates, but I think Rich is going to lay some smacketh down, so come on, Rich.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks, man. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Is my mic on? Mic's on is good. Good morning. Thanks for coming out. We're going to talk about phosphate today. Just a little background. My name's Rich. I do like cephalopods. My wife likes cephalopods. My kid likes to dive. She's 10, so I'm kind of thrilled with that. We have chickens, bald cats, bald dogs, and then that is my dog. That's ridiculous. This is a secret home lab. So this is a room in the house that my patron, my wife, lets me have and supports me for doing all kinds of stuff. And the room grows and shrinks for breeding projects. And what we were doing recently is, this is the larger Pacific striped octopus, so this started in my house and then moved to the aquarium. So that's really cool. We got a paper coming out on that. I have a pair of these guys, and I like to feed them clownfish. Because I think we're wasting our clownfish culls and they should be used as marine feeders. Then I have this cool job at the California Academy of Sciences where I help manage a 212,000 gallon reef tank. We'll talk a little about that in a minute. Sometimes I'm very lucky and get to play Jacques Cousteau kind of stuff, which is almost as unbelievable as getting the award last night. We've recently bred the pygmy seahorse, Hippocampus bargebanti, and we're really excited about that. No one's seen this outside of the academy yet, and I'm going to show you this piece of video of a male bargebanti giving birth to a single baby that no one has seen yet, but we figure it's MACNA. Yeah. So that's pretty cool. That's what I get to do at work. But here we're talking about this. We're going to start about this. This is my reef tank at home. And it's a 150-gallon reef tank, and the phosphate level it runs at, anyone want to take a guess? 0.04? No. 4.0, almost. 50,000 parts per million. It's running at an average is about 1.8, right? So common wisdom in the hobby is that my tank should look like that. And that my corals should be breakable, that if there's wind outside the tank, it will shatter the corals. So a little bit about the system so we can get into why I'm running ridiculous levels like that. This was the tank originally as it was set up in 2001 with the hip canopy and those awesome ferns that totally hide the top and all the crap that's up there. We had to do some floor stuff in the house, so we did a semi-built-in, which was kind of fun. What happened there? Is that right? That's what it looked like with nothing around it, and then we kind of skinned it in. I left the stand in place because I figured why build something special? We'll just marry the built-in around the stand and paint everything, and it kind of ended up looking like that, which is way better than a thing with ferns on the top. Dwayne, who's here, he helped me make this door. The door was the hardest thing. It was totally important to me. I had a lot of space above the tank to get in, so it's a 2-foot door. And then with all that space, I thought I'd just hang a bunch of crap there and make it really difficult to get in. There's a 10-port lockline manifold that allows me to redirect the flow when things change. I'm also lucky I can access the tank from the back, from the bathroom. So the bathroom has 2 doors. One goes into that, which I recently cleaned up. I tend to not clean things up because that's what I do at work. And I want to enjoy the tank, which is actually pretty important to why my phosphate's ridiculous. The life support is all under the house. There's a 40-inch crawl space, and under there, it looks like that. It's a huge salt creep everywhere, but that's why it's under the house. I don't have to clean it. Once in a while, I'll go down and hose everything down there and kind of clean it up. this was originally, there's a 180-gallon sump over there and then another kind of a 50-gallon pre-sump. And originally I was growing frags and stuff down there, but that going under a crawl space gets old as faster than you would think. So this is, you know what, I need to do something real quick. So there we go. So this is the tank as it was in 2011 after it was built in. And up until this point, I was kind of doing all the regular stuff. It was regular water changes, regular GFO changes, regular GHC changes, and their numbers were where they're supposed to be. Kind of, I was keeping it in line. So after I got my job about 7 years ago, well, let me step back just one sec. My philosophy about reef keeping, at least at home, is benign neglect. I like to set the thing up, make everything as automated as possible, and then not do anything to it. Because for me, and I understand people who like to tinker with the gear all the time and wipe it down with a diaper and all that kind of stuff, I like the in-tank stuff more than the out-tank stuff. So I don't want to spend time making cords all bundled up, because then you're going to have to unbundle them. I also don't make my bed, because I'm just going to sleep in it the next night. So benign neglect, and I like to be able to go on a trip without being terrified about my tank the whole time. So that's what I do. So what happened was I got the job, and my maintenance about changing GFO and GAC got longer and longer in between. Like, you know, a month, 2 months, 6 months, and then I was like, why am I even pretending that this is an issue? Am I changing if I'm waiting too long, I'm changing the levels randomly instead of setting up something stable. So I kind of just gave it up all the way. This is the same shot with the different lights on, because for people who hate blue lights and people who like blue lights, there was a thread about this tank once, and people hated the corals, and then I posted the blue picture, and then all of a sudden it was great. So I think that's an interesting piece of perception, that disco is the good. So this is the tank after I stopped caring, and I feed the tank a whole lot. So I used to consult for Reef Nutrition, so I get a very, very nice deal. They're very generous with me with the food. And I feed a lot of food. Like, I don't know, did you see Jamie Craggs' talk the other day, where he showed how he was doing heterotrophic feeds and the tank was cloudy? I do that every few days. I think flood feeding is important, so food gets to everyone in the tank rather than trying to force them to feed. That's just the way I do it. So I stopped doing GFO, and I feed even more. And this was the tank last week. So the colors are okay, the growth's pretty good. The phosphate here is 1.8 part per million. So what's going on here? What is phosphate in the first place? It's a building block of matter, it's in everything, and in reef tanks we're concerned about phosphates generally in terms of its effect on algal growth and its effect on coral skeleton development. Inorganic phosphate versus organic phosphate. Who knows the difference? No one. No one cares. And I'll tell you why. There's such a good reason why you don't care. You can test for one, you can't test for the other one. So the one you can't test for, let's just ignore it forever, because you can't do anything about it. So there's no reason to let your brain kind of figure it out. If you want information about more of the chemistry of phosphate, take a look at any of Randy Holm Farley's articles, or Craig Bingman is here. You can put him in the corner and ask him anything. It's vast and it's complicated and it's very interesting, but I'm being more practical. This paper here from '79 was kind of the one paper, or one of the several papers, that gave us the idea that high nutrient levels, especially phosphate, would reduce your skeletal density by 50%, this paper says, and would stop calcification, and it would do a detrimental increase in algal competition. So it's in the literature, so it's interesting stuff. You can read more about that if you want to read this article. And I'll talk about some new papers that kind of say the opposite of this now. We have this number, 0.05 parts per million, and the best I can tell, that kind of came out of somebody's pocket. That somebody just said, that's probably a decent level that we should shoot for. In the ocean, it varies widely from location to location and from depth. Are you on the reef or are you in the middle of the ocean? So you get anywhere from 0.005 to 0.9 on reefs. So you do get a wide range of it. 0.05 just seems to be where we settled. So I write the skeptical reef keeping stuff, and so when people say 0.05 is the number, I kind of go, well, where did that number come from, and how much money are we spending trying to make everything fit that number? So it's good to know what you're going for and why, I think. Now, in the 90s, when the Reef Aquarium was out, it talks very little about phosphate. It mentions a test kit, mostly in how not to add phosphate by making sure you have a carbon source, a GAC, that doesn't have phosphate. And it talks about, I was talking to Charles about this, we want to have low stock tanks with very few fish and feed it very little. That was kind of the idea. That's how we dealt with phosphate. There was no real other way to deal with it at the time. And at the time, nitrate was the devil. If you remember back then, it was everyone, nitrate, everything's going to die. My nitrate's 5, oh my God. And stop using those filters, they're nitrate factories, right? Because we could do something about nitrate. I have no idea why this picture of, Mitch is the devil, that's what it is. Nitrate's not the Mitch is the devil. So then about 2003, I was introduced to ROJA. It was introduced in different parts of the world earlier, but in the early 2000s when we started seeing it in the States. This is a granular ferric oxide, and it will bind the phosphate to the surface of this oxide. And then you can remove it from the tank. So all of a sudden we could do something about phosphate instead of just testing it. And then of course phosphate became the devil, or when we know that this is the devil. I'm so glad you laughed at that. Now we have a million different kinds of phosphate-absorbing products. We've got lanthanum chloride to GFOs to some aluminium-based. I said aluminium for you. So there's all kinds of stuff. I just want a word about lanthanum chloride, and you should actually talk to Greg Bingman about lanthanum chloride. He's pretty anti it because we can't test for it, and we don't know what it does to people. So he's very nervous about lanthanum chloride, and rightfully so. So we'll talk about phosphate a little more and why it might not be that important. So we got a ton of products that you can buy now to deal with phosphate, and we've got a ton of testing that you can do with phosphate, even the Triton test. And I tested my phosphate with them the other day, and I'll tell you about that later on. But yeah, you can test it now. So let's talk about testing for a minute. Yeah. Given our test kits all have inherent uncertainty in them, about 5 to 10%. Then there's also, let's see, is this the right one? Yeah. And there's many other ways you can make testing errors. First of all, I don't see any numbers in those boxes. Apparently there are numbers in those boxes because my mother is a mutant and I don't see color well because of her. And people have different ranges of colors they see as well. So titration test kits, if you don't see the color well, there's a huge fudge factor. Also, when do you call the test done? And everyone does this differently. When the color starts to change, when the color is pretty changed, when the color is solidly changed. What light are you using? Are you using the same light every time you check your test kit? Because different light's going to make it look different, just like we look at our corals with blue lights. How are you measuring a drop when you do the drop into the vial? Are you shaking it all up, or do you have reagent on the side? All these things can be inconsistent and can affect your test results. Is your test kit old? Have you ever calibrated it? So one of the things we're interested in, I love this. You want to know if your test is accurate and precise. So what you want is right in the middle of the Venn diagram. You want the mitten on the kitten. That's what you want. So precise is how reproducible is the test. Accuracy is how close you are to the actual value of what you're testing. Accuracy is really hard for us because you determine your accuracy by your last test. So the last time it was 0.05, and this time it's 0.06. That's pretty close to the true value, but you have no way of knowing what the true value is. In the lab, you would make a standard, like for magnesium, and you mix it up to 1,300, and you'd know that's what it would be, and then you could use that as a standard to know how accurate your test is. Precision is a more interesting one. So how many here have ever gotten a test result they didn't like? Right? How many of you then retested and then got a test result you liked? Right? How many of you got a test result you liked the first time? How many of you then retested? Yeah, it's 2 people. It's just Jim Welsh. So there's that whole thing going on. If you like the test result, you go, yeah, and you go on with your day. If you don't like it, you go, I better retest. So precision is interesting. Try the experiment and see. I tried it with a Hannah checker and did the test 4 times and got wildly different results. Other people have done it and gotten very, very precise results. So it's probably me and some testing error I was doing. But that's a good thing to know. If you're doing testing errors, what good are the tests for, right? You got a 5 to 10% margin of error anyway. So what can you do with the test? What you get out of testing is trends, in my opinion. And you can see that the level is the same. I almost don't care what the level is. You know, you can try to figure out at one time, but then you set it, and that's where it is. Neptune, the apex, gives you a good idea of what nice trends look like. And also, they're pretty precise because you calibrate these things, and they're accurate. They're accurate because you calibrate it, and they're precise because it tests the same way every time. So you can see at the top, the pH is going up and down at about 0.1. If you do the test at different times, though, if you're not doing it like this, if you're in the trough of the graph, you know, are you going to freak out because your pH drops? Or are you at the top of the graph, you're happy because that's where it was the last time you tested it? Or if you look at the trend over time, you go, oh, it kind of goes up and down, but that's fine. You look at the bottom of the salinity, we got a big drop over there on the, can I do this? This would be fun. Oh, ooh. So we got a big drop there, and my phone rang, and it was my controller saying, hey, your salinity is really low. Sometimes it tells me it's 80, which that's really high for salinity. That's a testing error, neither accurate nor precise. But that's just a blip on the trend, so I'm not going to worry about it. So trends are great. So the tests I did were not anything I did for what I'm going to talk about. I got Aquarium Water Testing is doing testing for me, which is great. And this guy, this is Von Kowicki. He is one of the lab managers at the California Academy of Sciences. And because we were having questions about the phosphate in some of our tanks at work, we wanted to compare that with the methodology I was doing at home. So every month and a half or so, he's very nice and does a suite of tests so we get to see what's going on in the tank at home and we get to compare him. I consider to be accurate and precise. His job is to do these tests. Every day, he does these tests, and he does them the same exact way every time. The drops are calibrated out, so he's not guessing at the drop size. There's a device that makes the drop the same size every time. So it's pretty good. I trust his numbers over mine. Plus, we're using some kind of fancy, what is it called, the Hawk absorbic acid molybdate method. Whatever, he puts some stuff in a thing and puts it in a thing, and then he gets a number. But you'll see the numbers are also really, really detailed. We'll get like phosphate down to like 4 decimal places, which is just math. It's not true. So here's the tank. Apparently high phosphate made it a little blurry. This was what's the 6th month? June in 2012. The PO4 was 0.31. This is about when I started going, oh, I wonder what the PO4 is. We should check. This is the tank in August of 13, and the PO4 was 1.134. Notice, right, will it give it to me again? Where'd it go? Here. This is a pink tip, Paletta pink tip. Sorry, Mitch, some freaking pink acro with tips. So you can see this one here. A few months later, whenever it is, it's grown a whole lot. It's the same coral. So the phosphate still is 1.1, getting a lot of growth. Then here's that coral again. This is January in 14. And I think I've harvested this coral a couple of times in between because the tank is kind of a solid block of coral, so I'm bonsaiing it as often as I remember. Which is more fun, I think, than wiping salt creep off a skimmer in the crawl space. This was in March of 14. The phosphate rose 1.85. This one's great. This is 2.11. That's pretty high. This is last week, 1.8. According to the Triton, it's like 3. So we have to look into that. So the phosphate's high. We have growth, right? I'll tell you that the corals are not brittle. So, some of them are brittle, but some of them, when I did some reaquascaping a week or two ago, I had to do the full hammer and chisel to get it to come off and out. Stuff like digitata, that breaks, but it always does. So, yeah, that's the tank. And algae. There's no algae growth. What's going on with that? So we'll hopefully get to that in a second. Here is the numbers so you can see it on a fancy pants graph. The line at the bottom here, that's where people tend to want their phosphate, and this is where mine is. Nitrate is another interesting one. So nitrate used to be the devil. What are we doing? In the 90s and the hundreds. That's high, right? What's the current number people like nitrate at? 0. Yeah. Your test kit's showing you 0. It's no way. But that's a little bit higher, I think. This drop here is Inland Reef. Morgan Linster sent me an algal turf scrubber, and I thought I would give it a try because it's easy and lazy, because I can go take care of it once a week and not have to do anything about it. And I wanted to see if that's affecting the phosphate. So far it's not, but we just started the testing. But it's definitely affecting the nitrate. So that could be scary too. And then alkalinity seems pretty important. Mine jumped around a whole bunch because of adjustments on my calcium reactor were more than I thought they were. So from 7.5 to 14, that's pretty awesome. But it's over time. But it's still within the range, or the 2 ranges for alkalinity. The alkalinity is not low, it's fine, which seems to be important. So what the hell is going on? Why no algae? Why no herbivores? Why isn't anything broken? Are we only caring because we can test it and it makes us feel good? A little bit. The ratios matter. This is the Redfield ratio, and it's carbon to nitrogen to phosphorus. So this, I think, is going to be one of the reasons why I'm not going to see a much reduction in phosphate from the ATS. Because the nitrate's going to be affected 16 times more than the phosphorus will be. So I'm not sure about carbon dosing's effect on phosphorus. This is my attempt to do a study in my spare time because I want to know how effective these things are. People say, it was like in the debate when Jake was talking about, what are those little things called? Refugiums. Are they doing anything, and how do we know? So why you're putting if people are saying that algae turf scrubbles deal with phosphorus, with phosphate, is it really doing it? So we'll see, hopefully in a couple months. It's not. But really good for nitrate. And same with biopellets. The common wisdom is that it brings down your phosphate, but I haven't seen any actual reports that seem to show there's anything meaningful in that. But do we even care about the phosphate? So we got the ratios. It could be that the ratios have got all different kind of plateaus in them where numbers are okay. So it could be that I'm just fine with my phosphate 40 times high and my nitrate 100 times high, but if my nitrate was only 40 times high, the ratio might be skewed enough that I would start to have problems. Possible, don't know. I think my algae is, I don't have algae for 2 reasons. One, I've got decent herbivores, and the other is if you cover everything with coral, algae tends not to grow, which 11-year-old tank is a benefit of having that. I have some spots of bryopsis that I fight with. Tried the Tech M thing, get the magnesium. No, it doesn't work. So there could be different cutoff points. This is a study that we were looking at and this is the interesting thing about studies. It compares low nitrogen and phosphorus, adding it to the reef, right? So it compares, let me see if I see here, low N and low P, and you get things that look like this, which is bad. So everything's low, no nutrients. And we kind of see that in zeolite, right? The things get light when you're doing ultra low nutrient. It's fine if you like the look of that. If you're doing like me and you're doing an ultra high nutrient system, with a high N and high P, you start getting darker corals as the zooxanthellae grows. This is what was happening in Waikiki too, with their magic well water. And then down here you've got high N and low P, and the corals really look pretty sickly and not uniform at all. We're missing a couple things from this test. We don't have low N and low P, and we also don't know what high and low means in this test. So I contacted them to see if they can tell us that, but otherwise those are just numbers and we don't know what they mean. So I don't know if you want to hold on to that so much. There's a couple new papers that have looked at phosphate in the ocean and not phosphate in the ocean, in adding PO4 and other nutrients to look at growth and responses. This was to Stylophora or Stylophora, depending on how you feel. And this other test did Muricata, Acropora, or Acropora muricata. And both of these studies, corals grew the fastest at the highest phosphate concentrations, from 0.25 to 0.5. And the rate of coral growth for both species increased linearly with the phosphate concentration. So more phosphate, things grew faster. The skeletal density also went down. And so that's what makes people worry, right? Your brittle corals. But when things grow quickly, the skeleton doesn't grow quite as fast, so you see that anyway. You see that with people too. Your bones grow too fast, or your body grows faster than your bones can grow. So when we're talking about brittle coral skeletons, what does that mean? And also, it's probably species specific. So you all know there are some corals that are more breakable than other corals. Also, if the skeletal density goes down by 50%, so what? What does that actually mean? If your corals aren't getting broken by the flow in your tank, which they're not, who cares if the skeletal density goes down? Growth rates as well. The growth rate might be faster in my tank if my levels were lower. It's fine though. The growth rate's enough. Do I really care? Not so much. So why do I want to kill myself over this phosphate thing when it doesn't seem to be having any effect at all? I can watch the tank instead of freak out about the phosphate number and try to do something about it. I asked a couple people what they thought, because so many people are smarter than me. So I talked to Craig Bingman. He thinks that I'm doing natural selection and only picking the corals that are surviving in my tank, and that I have a pile of dead corals in this closet. That's true, but we all have a pile. We all have a pile of dead corals in the closet, right? There's always, all our systems are different, so you're always selecting for the corals that do well in your system. By definition, if it's not doing well, it goes in the closet, right? So I think we're doing that all the time. So I'm not really that concerned about it. The rate of, Simon and I talked about this a long time ago, but if you see one coral in your tank RTNing, say goodbye to that coral and don't do anything. Because why are you changing everything that 99% of your tank is happy with for that one coral? You want to frag it, move it somewhere else, that makes a lot of sense. But I'm not seeing a difference in the amount of times that's happening at this methodology versus when I was trying to keep everything lower. Craig says, certainly some corals are adversely affected by phosphate, and it's reasonable to suggest that there may be variance in different corals in their ability to thrive at high phosphate. He says algae, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically the algae might be being limited by something. So is there low iron in the tank? Is there, what did Craig actually think? Iron, or there's not enough nitrate, or silica, somebody was saying as well. So maybe there's something in the tank that the algae's not getting to grow. I'm okay with that. If that's true, that's fine. This is Sanjay. He's so small. He's this tiny, tiny man. Tiny, tiny man. That's why lighting's so important. He's always looking into the light. Sanjay says he never used to measure nitrates and phosphates for a long time on his tank, and when he bothered to measure nitrates, he was surprised to see the readings were over 50 parts per million, and corals were doing fine. And he slowly brought down the nitrates to 5 to 10, but didn't really notice any strong changes. Maybe 1 or 2 corals lightened up, which would make sense. So it's possible, says Sanjay, that one parameter, like nitrates or phosphates, could be way off and not yet manifest as problems. So maybe we have 10 parameters in our reef tank. And as long as 6 of them are okay, you're going to be fine. The other 4 are wacky. Who cares? The corals can deal. I hope that that becomes fact, that there are 10 parameters. 10. Only 10 care. So maybe that's the case. This is Charles. He sits in a bucket. He's so weird. I'm going to read this because I think this is good stuff. He thinks that elevated levels of carbonate and bicarbonate allow corals to continue to calcify and grow in the presence of high nutrients like nitrate and phosphate. So, your alkalinity is high, you're going to be okay. This is because higher nutrients produce more zooxanthellae, which then outcompete the coral for inorganic carbon, right? So there's not enough of that stuff in there that's necessary for calcification, and you slow calcification. By increasing the level of these two with higher alkalinity values, you get more carbonate and bicarbonate, the coral can continue to grow rapidly at levels that are higher. He also thinks that when he's been looking at it, that it's species specific in some corals. So it may affect corals differently, but everything in our tanks does. Mitch Coral says, "What's phosphate? I love dolphins." He has Tim tell him what phosphate is. So here's another tank. I'm going to show you a couple other tanks, and then I will be done with questions. This is Matt's NPS tank at work. The phosphate since 2012 has been running around 0.7. And he's got mad growth in that tank, and those things are spitting out babies all the time. And those are huge, thick skeletons, right? We're not talking some spindly acro that's barely holding on there. These very thick LPS coral with very robust skeletal growth. This is a Philippine tank I take care of at work. Since about 113, the phosphate's been 1.47. We're definitely getting growth in there. The big blue Youngii here, I harvest that every 3 or 4 months, so I take the tips off. So stuff's growing in there. This is another tank. This is more of a softy tank. Phosphate's 0.136. Joe Waiulo, arguably the best reef tank in the world. Joe says, "Rich is so pretty." Joe says he's very happy if he can keep the phosphate level at 0.12. Right? Makes a difference. In a giant tank, fighting phosphate is an expensive, time-consuming measure. So, would I get better growth at regular levels, whatever that means? Maybe. Would I get better color? Maybe. What's better mean? I don't know. Do I need more growth? If I wanted more growth, is it worth it for me to spend the time and energy to bring the levels down to get faster growth? For me, no, because that just means more work on the tank, and I do that at work. So work, and work. Am I getting weak corals? No, I'm not seeing weak corals. I'm not having really any algae problems, you can see. So it's not really a bother to me. So what am I saying and what I'm not saying? I'm not saying that. Give me 1 second. There we go. It's important to understand that the reality of water chemistry testing comes with an inherent uncertainty, and that chasing numbers can be detrimental and not effective. If your phosphate, if you're trying to get it to be 0.05 and you're testing at 0.06 or 0.07, does it really make any sense for you to be trying to bring it down 0.01? That seems like an insane task to deal with. And constantly tweaking the water parameters can be detrimental. It's often better to leave everything alone. What I'm not saying is that everyone should run out and do high PO4 reefs. And please, no one go out and say, "Rich said that high phosphate, you're a jerk if you don't run high phosphate." We don't know what's going on in these tanks. But and we need more testing. So, and you guys can test. Check out the Skeptical Reefing 10, I think. I talk about how simple tests that we do can be really helpful. Obviously, this is at home, so I'm not spending the resources of the academy to do these tests, nor do I have the time or the money, right? Research takes time and money. But our quasi-research that we can do with 2 10-gallon tanks and a simple comparison can really help point us in the direction of further research. So don't ever discount that your experiences and evidence aren't worthwhile. We don't really know what's going on in our boxes of water. I would imagine the next 10 years we're going to find out all kinds of different things, with bacteria that we didn't really know about or consider. And it's wonderful that our observations can make a difference. It could turn out that PO4 levels are not a big deal at all. It's just that we have an ability to do something, so we're focusing on it. It could be that my tank will die and crash a horrible death while I'm gone this weekend, and that there'll be a sign that says, phosphate did this, and we'll know. Or it could be that in 5 years, everyone will be phosphate dosing. Rich's two little fishes phosphate additive. So that could happen. Only time's going to tell. Until then, I'm not sure if I'm going to mess with my tank much more, or if it's not broke, don't fix it. You know, it's fine for me. I like it. Do I need to do anything? Probably, because I'm an idiot and I'll keep picking at it. But we'll see what happens. So I'd like to thank all these people, and special thanks to MACNA for having me. And all these people were helpful in all of this kind of research that I was doing. Thank you so much for watching, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them. Thank you.